In this video, I'm going to be making lots of changes to this room, and I'm going to be installing a desk to replace this one that I made in a couple of previous project videos. I'll leave links to those in the description box. First, I need to clear the room as I'm also going to be redecorating, and this room was only redecorated about a year and a half ago, so I thought I should explain why I'm painting it again. I've never really been happy with the finish of the walls in this room. We didn't get them skimmed and there are imperfections all over the place. And because I chose a satin paint which has a slight sheen to it and it reflects a little bit of light, those imperfections catch your eye more than they would with a matte paint, which is what I'm going to use instead. There are also a few areas where the paint that I used bubbled up, which means that it's not adhering properly to the paint underneath. So I want to sort that out too. Usually when paint bubbles up, it can indicate that there is some sort of moisture issue with the wall, but I'm sure that's not the case here. And another reason, as much as I like this dark green colour, it's not exactly the colour I had envisaged. This colour is a little bit too vibrant. I found some paint that I prefer the colour of, which is this stuff here, and tested that out on part of the wall, and I think it's going to be perfect. It's more mellow and it's a cooler green rather than the warm green that's here currently. So let's get on with it. I started by scraping off any loose paint, and seeing what was underneath makes me think that these walls were not properly primed whenever they were freshly plastered, back when the previous owner of the home had that done many years ago, as the paint underneath looked dry and had a kind of chalky consistency. A good solution for freshly plastered walls would have been a watered down emulsion, which is what we applied to the freshly plastered walls in our bathroom when we had those walls plastered a few months back. I'll leave a link to the video about our bathroom renovation in the description box. Anyway, to try and rectify the problem, I'm going to start by wiping away all of the dry dust with a damp cloth and then apply some Zinsser Bin, which is a shellac based primer. I'm not 100% sure this is the right solution, by the way, but it seemed worth a try to seal in that dryness. This is a brilliant product, but there are two downsides. One, it's expensive, and two, it can be a real pain trying to clean the brushes after use, so I just tend to keep hold of old brushes that are past their best and then bin them after use. But if you have any cleaning tips when using this stuff, do let me know. This is how the walls looked with all the loose bits scraped and primed, and then I mixed up some easy fill powder with some water so that I can skim over the areas to try and get the walls smooth again. I like to use my homemade hawk, which is just a piece of plywood screwed to a handle, and a trowel to apply it. This is how it looked with all the problem areas skimmed, and I waited for it to dry overnight. And then I used my random orbit sander with a 120 grit disc to sand all the filler flush with the wall. As you can see, this kicks up a horrible amount of fine dust, so I opened the door for ventilation and wore a respirator. After letting the dust settle for a few hours, I came back and just wiped everything down with a damp cloth to remove any dry dust. And then it was on to cutting in. I like to use these sash brushes for this. The bristles have kind of a point to them at the end. These are ideal and it makes the job of getting neat lines really easy. I'll link to these in the description box. I don't really use expensive paintbrushes and I won't use the cheap ones either, but I really like the mid-range ones. I expect to pay about £3 to £4 per brush, and I wash them thoroughly and reuse them over and over again. Unscrewing sockets and light switches is always a good idea for neatness, being very careful not to touch any live electrical wires of course, but there were some devices that I didn't want to unplug, like our modem and router, so I just worked around those with the sash brush. And then I'm going to get the rest of the walls with my roller on an extension pole, which also makes the job quick and easy. The room needed 2 coats and then the walls looked nice and smooth. Not perfect, but much better than they were, so the primer trick seemed to work. So now finally I can get my desk installed that I made in 2 previous videos on my channel. I'm going to rest the desktops on top of the drawer units and then attempt to fit the 2 pieces of the top together, and I needed another pair of hands for that, so my wife helped me to align the floating tenons with the mortises. Are we in? It was pretty tricky to get the 2 tops together tight, so I ended up bringing in a couple of long parallel clamps so that I can squeeze the join together. And then from underneath I can add the bolts through the metal plates and into the threaded inserts. The join turned out pretty good, better than I expected actually. A few people in the comments section of the last video suggested that I should use worktop bolts for this, and that's a really good idea. I wish I'd have thought of that. But this is going to be good enough for me. Everything is flush and the gaps were pretty tight.
so then I can maneuver the desktop and the drawer units where I want them.
Originally I was going to be making a leg to support this corner of the desk, but I've since decided that I quite like the idea of not having that leg there. It's just something that'll get in the way of my feet while I'm working. And also I don't particularly want to use up my last piece of birch ply making a leg. So now I think what I'm going to do is add a batten to the wall to support this corner of the desk.
I first scribed a line on the wall with a pencil at a slight angle, as I want the line to be level with the underside of the top and not the beveled edge. And I went looking for a scrap of wood to use as a batten. I found this offcut of scaffold board that'll do the job just fine. I just need to clean it up with my hand plane. Then I cut it to length and drill a few pilot holes. I used my SDS drill to drill it into the wall, and I decided to use concrete screws driven straight into the brick, which usually work really well for me, but on this occasion I didn't feel they held as well as they normally do. Perhaps because this wall might be made of thermalite block or something, I'm not sure. So I ended up adding a couple of brown rawl plugs and long screws just to make sure that it would be nice and strong, because there is going to be a fair amount of weight on this desk. And then I sneezed. And I painted the batten just to help it blend in better with the wall. And I'm going to leave a gap of about 10mm at the back just so that I can run a few cables down there. And then I secured the desktop to the batten from underneath, obviously being conscious of only adding screws where expansion and contraction of the wooden top is not going to cause any issues. The same applies to securing the top of the legs to the drawer units too. Just one screw through each rail is all that it really needs. The top is so heavy that it's not going to move around much anyway. Then I can start installing everything back on the desk. And originally I had made a cutout at the back corner of the desk which I had in mind for mounting the two monitors, but as the monitors I have here are widescreen, they're really quite big, and I noticed that that wasn't going to work, so I ended up securing them to the edge instead. By the way, I'll leave links to the stuff that I'm using here, like the monitor stands and monitors, in the description box. And I got a few other bits set up before Dylan came to inspect everything. I remembered that I had an old cable tray stored in my shed, so I went to retrieve that, and this is going to be ideal for keeping my cabling tidy. I'm going to use some screw-in eyelets to mount it, which I can just bend to shape with my needle nose pliers, and then I can screw them into the underside of the desk and hook the cable management tray in place. And then I added another hook just to hold the cable tray up in a way so that I can just unclip it and clip it. Pretty cool. I mentioned in the last video that I was still waiting for the drawer handles to arrive, and here they are. I got these from a company called Barn and Brass. I'll leave a link to their website in the description box below. Just for full disclosure, these were gifted to me by Barn and Brass, but I'm not being paid to feature them. These are solid brass handles and they're absolutely beautiful. They're going to look great against my Sapele drawer fronts. The difference in quality between these and the gold-plated zinc handles that are available to buy in most places is night and day. Obviously these are a more expensive option, but I wanted something a bit special, and these definitely fit the bill. And I knocked up a quick MDF drilling template to help me drill all the holes, and you'll see here that the holes line up with the holes on the handles, and I've got a centre line on the jig which I can align to a centre line on the drawer fronts, and this allows me to get each handle placed a consistent distance down from the top of each drawer front. And I'm well pleased with these. I think they look amazing.
So I've been working from this desk for 3 or 4 days now, and generally it's working out really well. Really happy with it. It's such a big improvement from the previous desk. But there are a couple of things that aren't perfect, and I'll bring you in closer and show you those. I wish that I'd made this corner section perhaps 1 or 2 inches deeper. It does work okay. I can kind of tuck myself in right up to it, but it just feels like it needs to be a little bit deeper, but that is a little bit nitpicky. Secondly, most of the time I'm using my mouse, it's in this area here, but occasionally I've found that I've kind of gone over the join between the 2 desks, and then the light sensor on the bottom of the mouse can't detect the surface properly, so I kind of lose my mouse pointer occasionally. But again, not a major issue, and I'll just have to get used to using my mouse in this area, which is fine. Okay, so a quick tour of the drawers. In the top one, I've just got general stuff. In this one, I've got all of my camera equipment, so I've got my screen, lights, lenses, filters, all of that stuff. And in the bottom, are my hanging files, and this works great. Then in this one, we've got stationery. This is where I keep some of the smaller items that I sell on Etsy, so I can just package them up at my desk and get them sent out. So for example, some of my KB oil wax, this is the food safe version. Really nice wood finish. If you'd like to buy some, there will be links below. And then I've got my binoculars and my other camera. And then this gap between the drawers and the desktop is a great place to store my notepads. So you might have noticed that I've mounted a third monitor to the wall above my desk, and that's because I wanted to have a dedicated screen set up for a new security camera system that I've recently installed, which is going to enable me to keep an eye on the workshop and the rest of our home and garden. I've been looking to upgrade our security cameras for a while, mainly because now that we live in a bigger house, we really needed more cameras to cover everything. A few months back, I almost pulled the trigger on buying a new set of Google Nest cameras, but for the number of cameras we needed, it would have cost well over £1,000 plus a monthly subscription fee to store footage on the cloud of, I think it was about £7.50 a month. So when a company called Anker, or Onker, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, got in touch with me recently asking if I'd like to try out their new range of cameras and DVR, I jumped at the chance, and I think this package offers much better value for money at around half the price of that Google system and with no ongoing subscription costs. So this is the MCK 400 system. I got a DVR box with a 2TB hard drive, which is capable of running up to 8 cameras. And each camera is PoE, which means power over Ethernet. That means you don't need to run a separate power supply to each camera. You can just plug it into the Ethernet cable and it takes the power from the NVR box. It did take a fair amount of work to run all of the cables through the loft space in our home, but it's one of those jobs where once it's done, it's done. And the end result is fully wired cameras that are not reliant on Wi-Fi, which for us is a big bonus as our Wi-Fi here is terribly unreliable. The build quality of the cameras seems really good, and they give excellent image quality even in low light situations with their f1.0 aperture 2.7-inch lenses and built-in supplemental LED lights, which you can switch to automatic on or off in the settings. And you can fully configure all of the settings to get it behaving just as you want to. There are some great features, including a privacy filter where you can select the areas that are not part of your property to protect the privacy of your neighbours. And you can also select which areas you want to track motion detection in and set up alarms to your mobile device whenever the motion activation is triggered. It's really quick and easy to scroll back and look at old footage, not only using the DVR but also via a separate web app if you choose to use it, and a mobile phone app which is really quick and responsive in comparison with the old system that I was using. And this truly is a plug and play system. You literally plug everything in, turn it on, answer a few questions on screen and set up an account, and you're good to go. So yes, so far I'm really happy with it, and if you're interested in this kind of a system, I definitely recommend checking out the links in the description box below. I was planning on featuring a couple of other projects as part of this video. I need to make some sound absorption panels for the walls and also a set of curtains for the doors, all in an effort to try and reduce the amount of reverb in this room for recording video narration and also for recording podcasts, which by the way, you should check out. But unfortunately, the fabric that I've ordered hasn't arrived on time, and let's be honest, my sewing skills leave a lot to be desired, so perhaps it's for the best. But if you are interested in seeing those, let me know down in the comments and maybe I'll do a separate video about them. So that's it for this one. Please subscribe to my channel for more weekly woodworking videos if you'd like to help support the channel, plus get early access to my videos, some exclusive videos like the ones on screen now, free project plans and cut lists, and a name credit at the end of my videos. You can check out my Patreon page and YouTube channel membership options in the description box below. Thank you for watching.